Catherine had always been a woman dedicated to her family. From a young age, her dreams and personal aspirations took a back seat so that she could fully devote herself to her husband Richard and their son Daniel. While Richard built a successful career as a lawyer, Catherine was the pillar that upheld the home, taking care of all the day-to-day details to ensure her family lacked nothing. The years passed, and Daniel grew up with his mother as his greatest supporter. It was Catherine who helped him during late-night study sessions, who prepared his meals during hectic times, who comforted him in moments of doubt and uncertainty. She was present at every stage of her son's academic life, celebrating his achievements and supporting him in his challenges. Richard was a focused and workaholic man. He spent long hours at the law firm he had founded years before, always in search of new cases and clients. His dedication to work was admirable, but it often made him miss important family moments. Catherine understood the importance of her husband's career and tried not to demand his presence, but deep down, she missed spending more time together. As Daniel grew up, the father-son relationship was strengthened through their common interest in law. Richard saw in his son his natural successor and had great expectations for his professional future. On the rare occasions he was home, he spent hours talking with Daniel about legal cases and courtroom strategies. Catherine watched this connection with a mix of pride and melancholy. She was happy to see father and son united, but at the same time she felt increasingly distant from that world. Dinner table conversations revolved around legal topics she did not master. Gradually, she felt like a mere spectator in her own home. Years went by, and finally, the big day of Daniel's graduation arrived. Catherine was beaming with pride as she saw her son receive his bachelor's degree in law. That night, as they celebrated with family, Richard announced he would throw a big party to celebrate Daniel's promotion from intern to junior lawyer, a pivotal moment for the start of his legacy. In the following days, Richard dedicated himself to the party preparations with unusual enthusiasm. He asked his secretary to book the hall of a fancy restaurant and made sure to personally invite each partner and employee of the firm. At home, he casually mentioned to Catherine, "It will be tomorrow night after work. But I guess you won't want to go, right? You're always kind of out of the loop with office matters." Catherine was left speechless by her husband's remarks. She hadn't even been considered for the celebration of their son's greatest achievement. It felt like a punch in the stomach. Daniel was her child too, but the celebration seemed to belong only to the father and the world of law. That night, she couldn't sleep well. She tossed and turned in bed, thinking about everything she had given up over the years to dedicate herself to the family. She felt invisible, as if all her effort and dedication meant nothing. She never did it for any recognition or to be congratulated, but it hurt her to know she wasn't even seen as an important part of the story. The next morning, while Richard and Daniel were excitedly getting ready for the big day, after work they would head straight there, Catherine remained quiet, carrying out her usual household chores. After they left, she was alone with her thoughts. The house, once so full of life, seemed strangely empty and silent. As the day progressed, Catherine's restlessness only grew. She couldn't stop thinking about the party that would take place in a few hours, a party she wasn't invited to. The idea of staying home alone while everyone celebrated became increasingly unbearable. Driven by an impulse, Catherine decided that she wouldn't be left out. She didn't want to make a scene or ruin anyone's night, but she needed to see with her own eyes her son being honored. She chose a discreet dress, got ready carefully, and headed to the restaurant. Upon arriving, she hesitated at the entrance for a few moments. She took a deep breath, gathering courage, and then quietly entered the hall. The party was already in full swing, with dozens of people animatedly talking in small groups. Catherine positioned herself in a more remote corner from where she could observe everything without being noticed. Her eyes soon found Richard and Daniel in the center of the hall, surrounded by several colleagues from the office. Her husband was proudly speaking about how their son was his natural successor, praising his brilliance and predicting a glorious future. Everyone was toasting and laughing, celebrating the young lawyer. As she observed the scene, Catherine felt a lump forming in her throat. There was the fruit of so many years of dedication and effort being celebrated by people who knew little of her journey. People who were unaware of the sleepless nights studying, of the doubts and uncertainties she had helped to overcome. For a few minutes, no one noticed her discreet presence. Catherine began to question whether she should leave when, suddenly, her eyes met Daniel's. Her son's smile faded for an instant, giving way to an expression of surprise and confusion. He looked around as if trying to understand why his mother was there alone. Without hesitation, Daniel stepped away from the group and walked toward Catherine. "Mum, you came!" he exclaimed, genuinely happy, wrapping her in a tight embrace. The gesture caught the attention of nearby guests. Gradually, silence spread throughout the room as people noticed the discreet woman at the back of the party, the honoree's mother whom no one had remembered to invite. Richard, realizing what was happening, looked away, visibly uncomfortable. Catherine remained silent, knowing that her mere presence already said everything that needed to be said. Daniel took his mother's hand and led her to the center of the hall, where moments earlier he and his father were the center of attention. With a voice choked with emotion, the young lawyer began to speak. "I would like to make a very special toast to the person without whom I would never have gotten this far, my mother, Catherine." A murmur of approval swept through the hall. People raised their glasses in honor of Catherine, who felt her eyes well up at her son's gesture. Richard, embarrassed, also raised his glass, avoiding his wife's gaze. The rest of the night passed more peacefully. Catherine stayed by her son's side, receiving compliments and words of admiration from the guests. Many expressed surprise at discovering how fundamental she had been in shaping Daniel. When they finally returned home, it was already early morning. Daniel could not hide his dissatisfaction with his father upon discovering that he had not invited her. "Why didn't you invite Mom? How could you think of celebrating this moment without her?" Richard sighed, tired. "I thought she wouldn't be interested. It's always been just the two of us in this matter of law." "Are you kidding?" Daniel interrupted him, indignant. "She may not be a lawyer, but if it weren't for her, I wouldn't have even gotten to where I am. Who was with me when I spent nights studying? Who made meals when I didn't even remember to eat? Who worried when I came home late? Dad, Mum never needed to be in the office to be essential in my life." The son's words hit Richard like a punch to the stomach. For the first time, he realized how much he had underestimated Catherine's role over the years. He always thought his professional effort was the most relevant, that his son's career was solely his own merit. But at that moment, he realized how mistaken he had been. Richard remained silent for a few moments, absorbing the impact of the situation. Then, without saying anything, he got up and went to the bedroom where Catherine was already lying down. He paused at the door for a moment, hesitating, and then entered. "Catherine," he called softly. She looked at him without saying anything. Richard sat on the edge of the bed, running his hands over his face as if searching for the right words. "I was wrong with you," he finally admitted. "I always thought that what happened at the office was what mattered most. But I could never have achieved anything without you. Daniel would never have gotten here without you. And I'm sorry it took me so long to realize that." Catherine's eyes filled with tears, not because she expected that apology, but because, for the first time in many years, she felt that her husband truly saw her. "I should have invited you to the party," Richard continued. "But more than that, I should have recognized you long before, for everything you've done, for everything you've sacrificed. Catherine, you are the true foundation of this family." She smiled slightly, took a deep breath and replied, "The important thing is that you're recognizing it now." Richard held his wife's hand and squeezed it firmly as if to say, without words, that from that day on everything would be different. Catherine reciprocated the squeeze, feeling that something fundamental had changed between them. That night, when she was finally alone with her thoughts, Catherine felt a sense of renewal. The party episode had been painful but also liberating. She was proud of who she was, of all she had done for the family over the years. Her dream had always been to be a mother, to take full care of a child. But now, she realized she also needed to look at herself, her own dreams and aspirations. The next morning, Catherine did something different from her usual routine. She sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a blank sheet of paper. She picked up a pen and began writing a list of things she wanted to do, for herself and for no one else. The first thing she noted down was, go back to studying. Catherine had always dreamed of studying psychology, but she had given up on it to dedicate herself to her family. Now, with Daniel graduated and on his way in life, she felt it was time to rekindle that desire. Next, she wrote, travel. It had been years since she took a vacation, always busy with domestic demands. She decided it was time to visit new places and experience new cultures. The list kept growing with long repressed wishes, taking a photography course, learning to play the piano, joining a volunteer group. Catherine was surprised by the number of things she wanted to accomplish. When Richard entered the kitchen, he found his wife lost in her thoughts, a serene smile on her face. He approached, curious to know what had made her so excited so early in the day. "What are you doing?" he asked gently. Catherine looked at her husband, a new light shining in her eyes. "I'm planning my future," she replied with conviction. Richard took the list and read it attentively. When he finished, he looked at his wife with a mixture of admiration and regret. "Have all these dreams been here all along?" "They have," Catherine confirmed, "but now is the time to make them come true." Richard nodded, understanding the importance of that moment. "And how can I help you?" The question caught Catherine by surprise. It was the first time in many years that her husband showed interest in her personal projects. She smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude. "We can start by planning together. How about we look at some college options for me to go back to studying?" Richard agreed enthusiastically. In the days that followed, the couple spent hours researching courses, discussing possibilities, and making plans. Daniel, noticing the change in the family dynamic, was delighted to see his parents more united and his mother so motivated. In the weeks that followed, life in the family house began to change. Catherine enrolled in a college prep course, determined to achieve her dream of studying psychology. Richard reorganized his office routine to spend more time at home, actively participating in his wife's new phase. Daniel's graduation party had been a turning point not only for Catherine, but for the whole family. What had started as a moment of exclusion turned into a catalyst for significant change. Catherine discovered that it's never too late to start over and to pursue her own dreams. Richard learned to appreciate not only professional success but also the small victories of everyday life. And Daniel, observing his parents' transformation, understood the true meaning of partnership and mutual support. The story of that family was no longer just about the brilliant career of a lawyer and his prodigy son. It was about recognition, personal growth, and the importance of never underestimating the power of someone who works behind the scenes, supporting everything else. The party that Catherine was not invited to became the beginning of a new journey, a journey of self-discovery, strengthening family bonds, and the fulfillment of long-dormant dreams. And in this new phase, everyone had a guaranteed place in the celebration of life. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.